We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Sports Legends of the Carolinas. I'm your host, Scott Fowler, sports columnist for the Charlotte Observer, where I've worked since 1994. And as always in this podcast, I'm traveling across both Carolinas, seeking out some of my very favorite sports legends and asking them to tell the stories behind their rise to legendary status. Now, for this episode of Season 3, we're in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and are delighted to be inside the home of tennis legend Stan Smith.
Since you have been so involved in the game so deeply for so long, your opinion on who the greatest player in the game ever was?
You mean the second greatest?
Well, of course, second greatest.
Stan Smith is a tennis Hall of Famer who won both Wimbledon and the U.S. Open in the early 1970s. He was once the world's #1 tennis player. Smith grew up in California, but has long lived in Hilton Head, South Carolina, where at age 77, he remains very active in the Smith Stearns Tennis Academy. But if you're not a big tennis fan, what you may know him for best is the iconic Adidas shoe that bears his name, a white leather shoe with green trim around the heel and bearing his signature. In fact, the name of his book in 2018 was Stan Smith, Some People Think I'm a Shoe. In our conversation, we talked tennis, footwear, the royal family, Wimbledon, and much more. Stan Smith, next on Sports Legends of the Carolinas.
Stan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to be part of it.
Well, you're so nice to let us in here today. You've just a gorgeous day in Hilton Head, South Carolina. How long have you been in Hilton Head?
Well, I've been here since '71. I came here and Charles Frazier was trying to develop the tennis program. He just started the golf tournament a year or two before that, and so he realized that tennis was becoming very popular, and he wanted to really explode our tennis program at Sea Pines, and since that time, we had so many tournaments, and the facility grew from like 8 courts to 30 courts, and so it's been great to see tennis as a big part of Sea Pines Resort. Yeah,
there's tennis courts everywhere. It hasn't been overrun by pickleball, it doesn't look like yet, right?
Well, pickleball is creeping in, so certainly there's interest in pickleball here too.
Sure. Tell me a little bit about growing up in California.
Well, I grew up in Southern California, Pasadena, California, and had 2 older brothers, and they were quite involved in sports. And my parents, actually, my father was a coach at Pasadena City College, and he coached different sports, and he actually played tennis, and he never really coached me very much. But my parents would both play tennis, and then my 2 older brothers, that one of them particularly played in college, and he encouraged me to go to his college coach in Redlands, California, who was a great coach. And but the main thing that took place in Pasadena was a group of parents formed the Pasadena Tennis Patrons, and they hired Pancho Segura, who happened to be one of the best coaches ever. He coached with Connors and Chang and any number of players over the years, and in my opinion was the smartest tennis coach ever. So I was fortunate to have him coaching me for about 3 years, from age 15 to 18, when this program started in Pasadena. And so every Saturday morning we go to Pasadena High School. We had these courts that were kind of a beige, pinkish color. I don't know how they got that color, but we had hardwire nets. So those are nets that could last forever in a high school situation. And so we would practice from 8 to 12, and then from 12 to 1, the better players in our little academy, there's only about 15 to start with, would work with beginners. And so their motto was each one, teach one. And so that's where I learned 2 things. One was a little bit how to teach tennis to beginners. and also to give back to the game.
Mm-hmm. You were kind of a late bloomer, right? You didn't get in. You weren't one of these kids who was hitting a tennis ball at 6 years old.
No, actually, I didn't win a tournament until I was 15, and that was when this whole academy started. It wasn't an academy; it was just a Saturday morning program for 4 hours or 5 hours, and so they did. The parents got involved with taking kids to tournaments around Southern California, which was a hotbed for tennis. So it was not like being in the middle of Montana.
Yeah.
So we got to play a lot of tennis. It was great weather, and the program there grew of getting more and more kids on Saturday mornings. But it wasn't an academy situation like we have so many around the country now.
Did you immediately gravitate to serve and volley style that you were known for as a player?
Well, everybody in my era, pretty much, especially the older boys and some of the girls like Billie Jean. Billie Jean King was from Southern California, and she was a serve and volleyer. But all the men in my era, just about all of them were serve and volleys primarily. They didn't all serve and volley, but that was a style of play at the time. So, and I played basketball, I played football, I played baseball. Track and field, in junior high school. In high school, I just played basketball and tennis. Through about halfway through my senior year of high school, then I made a big decision to give up basketball at that point because I was really seeing that the tennis track that I was on being a little more of an opportunity for me than playing basketball.
When did you realize that you were like, oh my gosh, I could be really good at this, like number one in the world good at this?
Well, there's a couple of different steps. As a senior in high school, I ended up winning a couple of events and then actually won the national junior championships. But before that, I realized that I could play in college. And we happened to have two of the best teams in college tennis right at my doorstep in USC and UCLA. And so I realized I could play college tennis, and then around 1970, when I graduated from college, I played in the summertime in these tournaments that a lot of the top players were playing in mainly in the East Coast of the United States, and the biggest win that really set my mind feeling I could play professional tennis, because there really wasn't professional tennis as it is today until 1968 when tennis became open. And that was the year I graduated from college, so it was perfect timing. But when I won the NCAAs and then I won the Masters in 1970, that really made me feel I was one of the top players in the world at that point in time. Winning the Masters, the year-end tournament for the tour, really, set my aspirations very high.
Tell us a little bit about that.
The year-end tournament, it was called the Masters at the time. Now it's the ATP Finals. But we had a circuit. Actually, Jack Kramer from Southern California really helped organize this. It was Pepsi-Cola was the sponsor of it, and it's a Pepsi Grand Prix. Then there's a year-end tournament. That first year was only 6 players. We had a round robin of the top 6 players for the whole year. And we played in Tokyo, and it was we played in an arena, about 10,000 seat arena, and it was I don't think they had heat there. It was in December, it was freezing, but the critical day is it was a round robin, and I played Ken Rosewall in my second to last match, and he and I were both 4-0 in the round robin. So we knew that whoever won that match would be 5-0 and would win the tournament, would clinch it, even though I had another match to play the next night. It happened to be my birthday, December 14th. People can send in gifts if they want. And and it's also the day I got my final notice from the State Department saying that my final draft notice, that I had to report on December 16th in L.A. to the draft board. And so I ended up winning that match on December 14th against Ken Rosewall, which clinched it. The next night I played Arthur Ashe in the final match, And at the end of that match, around midnight, I got a flight out of Tokyo and got to L.A. because of the time change on the same day. So I left on the night of the 15th. I got into L.A. the morning of the 15th. I went home, went in the next day, and passed my physical. And I had a choice. I could either go in the bus just outside the door of the building where we had the draft board, and go to Fort Ord for 11 days and stay in the barracks, during Christmas, or I could go home for 11 days and have excess leave, in which I wouldn't be paid, but it wouldn't count against my leave time. And so it was a pretty easy decision. I went home, then I went up on December 27th and started basic training, was there for 2 months, and at the end of that time, I was based in Washington, D.C.
Mm. And you were in the Army for how long? I was in
the Army for 2 years. I was drafted just like everybody else, and in the Army for 2 years like everybody else. And the one thing that wasn't the same is a lot of the guys in my basic training program went to Vietnam pretty soon after the basic training program. So I was actually assigned to do clinics at the various Army bases around the country, around the world actually, and also to do things in inner city areas to help young kids, and also I was representing the United States playing Davis Cup, and so instead of being put into a maintenance area for trucks, I was able to play tennis and represent the United States, and we actually won the Davis Cup those 2 years I was in the Army.
Mm. You were one of the great Davis Cup players of all time for sure. Your record exemplary there. And so when you won Wimbledon, that was 71?
72.
72. You were out of the Army at that point, or you were still in?
No, I was in the Army. I won the U.S. Open and Wimbledon when I was in the Army.
While you were in the Army?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What do you consider, of all your many wins, do you consider one of those to be your biggest ever, or what would you say?
When I was 17, I wasn't a very good player, but I had these goals that I wrote down. And the 4 goals were to be a member of the Davis Cup team, to represent the United States. 2 was to be the number 1 player in the United States. 3 was to win Wimbledon, and 4 was to be the number 1 player in the world. And they were really dream goals. I wasn't even one of the top juniors in the 16 and under area in Southern California. So I actually was kind of embarrassed about it. I didn't even tell anybody, even my parents, about those 4 goals. I did tell a girl I was dating in high school, and she does remember that time. But,
so there's evidence. Yes.
Yeah, there's some evidence that took place.
And you got all 4, ultimately.
Yeah. Ultimately. And
which one do you think was your biggest win ever?
Well, winning Wimbledon, again, since it was one of those 4 golds, and it was sort of synonymous with being the number 1 player in the world at the time. It was the biggest tournament. The U.S. Open, of course, is our national event, and so it was very, very important. But winning Wimbledon seemed to be the granddaddy of all the, be like winning the Masters in golf.
Sure. And you beat Newcomb in the final there? Is that what?
I lost to Newcomb in 1971 in the finals.
Okay.
And then in 72, I beat Nastase.
Nastase, right.
Game, set, and match at Smith. We've been privileged to see what I think is the greatest tennis match I've seen since 1933. Now, there's a match that will be etched in our minds for years and years to come.
And,
right. Was he cheating?
He was temperamental, and he wouldn't necessarily cheat, but he would, he'd perform on the court. And the hardest thing was to kind of keep your focus when you played him. If he was arguing with the umpire or the linesman, and at that time the umpires and linesmen weren't quite as strong, and so he could get away with, arguing in his case for 2 or 3 minutes, and so it was tough to stay focused. And the other thing about him was he was so good.
Yeah, that was a problem too.
That was the biggest problem. He could run down balls. He was lightning fast and had tremendous natural talent, and so it was always a difficult match against him to kind of keep your focus. And then raise your game high enough that you could beat him.
And you beat him in like 5 sets, right? It was a long...
Yeah, I lost in 5 sets to Newcomb 6-4 in the fifth the year before, and then I ended up beating Nasasi 7-5 in the fifth. So it was, both matches could have gone either way.
Yeah, wow.
We'll be back right after this.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senwa Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Welcome back.
And you were contemporary then of Arthur Ashe, right?
Arthur was 4 years older than I, and he went to UCLA. It was one of his mistakes. He didn't make many mistakes. But,
we should point out your ringtone is tell the people what it is.
Yeah, my ringtone is a Southern Cal fight song.
Right, you're a big Southern Cal guy.
Yeah, UCLA was never my favorite situation, although I almost went there because the coach at USC didn't offer me a scholarship until May of my senior year in high school, and he didn't think I was that good, I guess, but he was a great coach. He wasn't very good at recruiting, but he was a great coach. So George Tolley, the coach at USC, developed players as well as had a great record. He won 10 NCAA titles, and John Wooden won 11 just across the town.
So with Arthur, what sort of effect did he have on your life?
Well, Arthur was a great player. He won 3 Grand Slam titles, but he was even a better person. And so he did so much in his life. And I was fortunate to be on the Davis Cup team with him for several years, and we traveled together nonstop with the team, and he and his wife and my wife became close. We stayed in similar places, right? And when we played at Wimbledon, the same apartment buildings, and he made a big impression because of he was always keeping up with the news of the day, and obviously supporting equal rights and diversity, and he made a huge impact in the world, especially with apartheid in South Africa, and standing up for equal rights in the United States.
Lieutenant, it has been said that the accomplishments of black athletes, which are in greater measure than their proportion of the population, advance the cause of the whole black community. Do you really think that's true?
I don't think it's wholly true. I think it's partly true as it applies to specific ways in which black athletes can use their influence and their power to wield tools that will affect progress. It's something to say you're the heavyweight champion of the world, or you're the Triple Crown winner, but if you really can't parlay this influence and this power to achieve practical progress, it's sort of a Pyrrhic victory at best.
And he was treated, like a lot of black players at the time, poorly in some places, certainly in a place like we played in Houston, and they wouldn't allow him to change in the men's locker room. He had to change in the junior boys' locker room at the River Oaks Country Club.
You mean, and he was a pro at that point?
Yes.
He wasn't in the same locker room as y'all?
No, he was. It was actually not a pro tournament quite then, but it became a pro tournament, and so that was just an example of things that took place, and we really were going to fight hard on that particular issue in Houston, but he said, no, just relax, don't worry about it. And they also had a Calcutta, which was interesting, where members of the club would actually bet on players to win the tournament. And this is even amateur events, but these a kind of a gambling situation, and it was very odd because, in a way, it was almost like buying, a player, which is almost a little
ownership, a little bit,
a little bit of that, which was very uncomfortable for not only him but for us, particularly in that situation. That didn't happen too many times around the country, but that did happen, I remember in Houston. But so we as players support him. He was a second president of the ATP. He was actually responsible for the code of conduct. He went around and took a census of all the players, of what should be accepted, what shouldn't be accepted, and literally, did the rough draft of our code of conduct. And he didn't put up with things. His father was a policeman, and he was taught to give respect to everybody, and to obey the rules, and obviously be a good sportsman. And he was the ultimate sportsman, and was really well liked. Roger Federer has been as well liked as any player in the world over the years, even though he was the top player for many years. That he would beat the players on the court, but they would vote for him as a sportsman of the year. And Arthur was beloved around the world as well, wherever he played, whether it be Australia or France or England or U.S. The fans loved him, and he was a class act.
You were really involved in some of the most fascinating times in tennis, I think, because of these tumultuous things you're referring to with Arthur, but also then in 1973 was the Battle of the Sexes with Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs.
Beautiful passing shot again off the backhand. We're back to match point for Mrs. Billie Jean King, who has given some demonstration tonight.
Predicted backhand down the line.
Bobby has yet to get a first serve in this game.
It is over. Let's watch Bobby Riggs. Excitement engendered all over the country as Billie Jean. Equality for women. Equal rights. It was Billie Jean who fought for equal pay for women in the U.S. Open tennis tournament and got it. All of the women of America, or at least most of them, seem to be caught up with the anticipation of this match.
What were your impressions at that time? I guess you were 26, 27 years old, of going into that match. Did you have a sense that Billie Jean would win that, or did you think this is a bad idea because, Riggs will beat her? Or what was your sort of opinion at the time?
Riggs was from Southern California, not all the time, but he spent a lot of time in Southern California. All these great players like Jack Kramer and Don Budge and Gene Mako and players of his ilk really thought that he would win that match, even though he's 55 years old. And some of the players actually thought he threw the match against Billie Jean. I don't believe that, but it was an amazing situation to see a guy like that who he had become a health nut at that point in time, and he was trying to find a fountain of youth.
Yeah.
And he, of course, had a big mouth and was a great promoter, promoting himself in every way. And so he really played up the idea of the men and the women. And it was great for the game. It was great for women's tennis, and not only just women's tennis, but the women's cause. And Billie Jean has been, the greatest advocate of women's sports, not just tennis, but women's sports and what young girls can do if they want to play tennis.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back.
Let's talk about shoes, because I love the tennis talk. I'm a big tennis guy myself, but you're as well known for shoes as anything else, and you're wearing a pair right now. What do you have on at the moment?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd wear these are the shoes that really were created at the very beginning.
As I think about that, a lot of people now think I'm a shoe, and they don't even know that I exist necessarily. They didn't know I was a tennis player. So the shoe has really taken on a life of its own, way beyond me.
And in fact, the shoes are almost exactly the same as they were in 1965 when they were created. The only change would be a loop, kind of keep the tongue from moving, and a little more support in the back with the heel of the shoe to support the Achilles tendon. But other than that, the sole's the same, the leather's the same, and the profile is the same. There's the 3 rows of holes, which kind of represent the Adidas 3 stripes, without being too obvious. And so this has been the shoe that's sold the most over the years. And in fact, they just last year just passed 100 million pairs of shoes sold.
Of that kind, or of all of them together?
Of all the shoes that have
100
my name on
million.
it.
Wow.
But these would be probably 70% of those shoes or 60% of those shoes. And there's over the years, there's been shoes made in every color, every design, every material, but with the same kind of profile of the shoe. So you know it's my shoe, although every company now has a shoe that looks a lot like mine. And in fact, one of the companies made it so similar that Adidas sued them and won the suit because when you saw the shoe, you thought it was my shoe.
Oh, wow.
In fact, they even advertised this is a Stan Smith shoe in their line, which was...
Oh, really?
I think that was the thing that sunk their ship.
I've certainly owned a few pairs of those, as probably of most people in America at some point or the other. What do you think made that shoe, the particular one you're wearing right now, which is the classic, I would say, what made it so popular?
Well, first of all, you say a lot of people, I think it should be a requirement that everybody have at least one pair of my shoes, but that's just my opinion. Might be biased, but the shoe is very simple. I think it's, as many things in life, the things that have longevity is the simplicity, and it's simple, it's comfortable, it goes with every type of clothing you want to wear. My favorite is see men in tuxedos wearing the shoe, or women wearing their best dresses wearing the shoe. And that's taken place. The price point, it's not an expensive shoe. It's not like...
What do they retail for nowadays?
Shoe. Now they're anywhere between $80 and $100, or maybe $120 for the kind of the special design shoes, or the premium leather. But it's still a pretty low price point in general, and it's not like a Jordan shoe that costs $300 or $400. And I don't know if there's been more Jordan shoes sold or mine, but probably maybe mine. But his shoe is at a much higher price point, and so it's been a very successful franchise.
I hadn't realized until I was researching for this interview, but that the shoe was originally came to being before you came to prominence and was endorsed by someone else, kind of an obscure French player first, right?
Well, it was created by the number one French player and Horst Dassler. Those two got together in France, and they created the first leather tennis shoe. Before that, we wore canvas shoes, and so we wore Converse and Keds and different shoes like that were canvas. And they started making some leather shoes for basketball, and these two, Robert Hayet and Horst Dassler, who is Adi Dassler's son. In fact, Adidas in Europe is usually referred to as Adidas. And they got that from Adi Dassler, that they shortened the last name of Dassler to Das. So that's Adidas, and then it's referred to as Adidas here and in other parts of the world. But they came on with a leather shoe which was unique. It was a high-tech shoe at the time, and now it's pretty much low-tech, but it's compared to the performance shoes that the good players on the tour wear. But it lasted longer. It looked better for a longer period of time. It was more comfortable, and it was very playable. And certainly during that time, a lot of players were wearing that shoe before 1972 when Adidas wanted to get a stronger presence in the United States. And so they're looking for an American player that had done well. So I was the number one player in the world at the time and was American. And so we had a relationship where I would endorse the shoe. They put my picture on it. They're looking for a great-looking face on the picture, but for that shoe, but they couldn't find one, so they ended up having me. So my picture was on the shoe. Robert Hayé's name was on the side of the shoe. And there was several iterations using Robert and myself with the shoe. Then within about 4 or 5 years, he was dropped off the shoe, and it's just been the Stan Smith shoe.
And your autograph's on there somewhere, right?
The autograph is right under the photograph. And the other thing that was kind of unusual was the photograph they took for the shoe was without a mustache. And from around age 21 or 2 until now, I've always worn a mustache, except for about a 6-month period, at which time they took the photograph. So they used that photograph, and there's a bit of a little shade underneath the nose, so it makes it look like it could be a mustache, but there's really not a mustache on that photograph.
I did not know that. And so nowadays, do people, young people, not tennis people, but just generally people think of you as a person or a shoe?
No, I'm almost 90% thinking. In fact, I did an article for Wall Street Journal about 4 years ago, and I said, about probably 80-90% of the people that know my name have no idea who I am. And my wife piped in and said, 95% of the people have no idea who you are. So, I realized that unless you were, let's say 15 years younger than me, which would make you over 60 right now, you would have not seen me play. And even 60-year-olds wouldn't have seen me play necessarily. So you wouldn't know necessarily I was a tennis player, although I've done a lot of different things around the world and met a lot of people. So my name is out there a little bit as just as an individual, but generally it's been a shoe. And so a young kid who's 16 years old, a girl or a boy, would not necessarily know I was a tennis player unless they were really tennis historians.
Right.
Even then, you're going way back. And so I've learned to accept that concept.
It's got that kind of classic sort of look to it. And yeah. Now, didn't you give one to Kate Middleton?
Well, I gave her a shoe. I gave her a shoe for both George and Charlotte about 5 years ago. Then a couple of years ago, I gave a shoe to Louis.
There were some familiar faces in the crowd for all you Low Country tennis fans. Hilton Head's Stan Smith was seen celebrating the 50th anniversary of his Wimbledon win in true style, sitting behind the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge in the Royals box. I think it's safe to say that Stan is the man. Get it, Stan the man? Okay.
We've done a lot of collaborations with various people, like Ross Simmons, and then Stella McCartney and I did a little thing with, she created a vegan shoe with her picture on one foot and my picture on the other foot of the tongue.
Really?
And we did a shoe signing one time, and Madonna shows up and demanded for me to sign the shoe.
Really?
And then Pharrell Williams has been part of the design team for Adidas, and he did some creative ideas with my shoe as well, and different colorization of the shoe. So the collaboration side has been part of the genius that Adidas has had as far as promoting the shoe.
And the funny thing, now you wore them, I assume, during your career as a player, right?
Yeah,
because no one wears them as for tennis players anymore, right?
I won Wimbledon wearing them. In fact, this funny story, I have a niece in London, and she was going to PE class, and she was wearing the shoe. And the PE instructor, this is like 5 years ago, the PE instructor said, "You can't wear that shoe for PE." She said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, it's a fashion shoe. It's not they call it a trainer performance shoe." And she said, "Well, my uncle won Wimbledon wearing that shoe." She said, well, I guess it's okay. But certainly I don't recommend people wearing a shoe, but certainly I did, and hundreds of other people did.
And so tell me a little bit about your family. I know that they were very involved in tennis, but
my wife, who I met when she was 15 for the first time, but she actually ball boyed for me when she was 13 years old. I was 17, playing a tournament in New York where she's from. And she went home and told her mother she ball boyed for me, and she had a crush on the guy I was playing against, really. But she said, well, wait till you're 18. Those 4 years won't make such a big difference. And I literally took her out for the very first time on her 18th birthday. Really? So it's kind of prophetic. But she was a very good player. She actually won more trophies than I did, junior tournaments. And she won the Orange Bowl, which is a big junior tournament at age 12. Yeah. So she played a lot of junior tennis along with her four sisters in the East Coast, particularly the Northeast. And so she went to school in California, and when she was 15, she was at this club, the La Jolla Beach and Tennis Club, where I was taking lessons from the pro there, and she was taking lessons from the pro there because she was going to a girls' school, and they would practice at the La Jolla Beach and Tennis Club sometimes. So I met her there. Then I took her out on her 18th birthday, and she ended up being the captain of the undefeated team at Princeton. She was in the first class of women at Princeton, and was a very good player, and was sort of borderline to play pro tennis. I mean, at that time, pro tennis was a fledgling opportunity for women as well as men, and she wasn't quite good enough and didn't want to go on the women's tour. And a couple of years later, we got married. She went on the men's tour. So,
right.
And then we had...
in the spectator's box.
Yeah, she had to sit through a lot of agonizing, matches, both good and bad. But then we had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and they all played junior tennis. And then they've all played college tennis. One only played for a year, but the other 3 were captains of their team in college. And then the eldest one, Ramsey, is the coach at Duke. He's been the coach at Duke now for 14 years, the men's tennis coach. So he played pro tennis for about a year and then hurt his shoulder and couldn't really continue. And so all 4 of our kids have enjoyed the game. And now we've got a couple of the grandkids of the 17 that are playing some junior tournaments and enjoying the game. And who knows about the others that are younger, whether they'll gravitate towards tennis or not. You were an extraordinary doubles player, too. People sometimes don't give short shrift to doubles, but let's talk about that for a second. Did you enjoy singles or doubles more as a player? Well, I think the ultimate thing of competition really is the mano-a-mano sort of thing where it's you against the other player. And in fact, coaching is now coming into the game where you can coach both in the men's and women's tour on when your players on that side of the court that you're on. But I'm really against coaching because I love the fact that you've got to figure it out. You've got to have plan A, and you can work that out with your coach. You might work out plan B with your coach too, but you might even have a plan C if things are going poorly. If you go to C, you're probably going to lose a match. But the point I'm making is that you have to figure out on the court itself what you need to do. The great thing about tennis is you're out there and you got to be able to go through the ups and the downs of a match where you got to hang in and compete and play until the last point, and that's without a coach there, giving that not only technical support but also moral support. And now in doubles, you do have that person. So in doubles, you got a player that's next to you that's working with you, and you're talking through strategy, on the point that's taking place, and so. But it's also fun to compete with another guy, and and you win as a team and you lose as a team, just like in other team sports. So I enjoyed both. The tennis, the singles was the kind of the ultimate in a way, but really enjoyed doubles as well.
What sort of advice do you give young people today, both in tennis and trying to progress through the ranks, as so many of your juniors would be doing, but also in life?
Well, I think that the ultimate thing, and I say this to our academy kids when I'm there, and is that you want to, that the USTA has a motto, be the best you can be, and certainly that motto is important in their lives. So I said, well, why don't you give whatever you're doing, whether it's playing tennis or your schoolwork or other interests that you have, give it the best shot you have. If you're going to be out there for 2 hours on the court, give it your best effort, and then mentally, try to keep under composure, because if you lose your composure, you stop thinking as well. And if you stop thinking as well, you're not going to be able to make those subtle changes in your game you might have to make to be able to turn a match around. So, and I've said to them just recently, our goal for you is to understand that no matter where you are on the court, there's usually one shot that's the right shot to hit, the smart shot. The definition of a smart shot is the highest percentage shot. And if we can get that so it's really clear in your mind that you're going to attempt the highest percentage shot no matter where you are on the court, you're not going to win every match, but you have a good chance to achieve the best of your potential. And so there's a lot of life lessons to be had in sports in general, and certainly in tennis. When you're out there on your own, you've got to be able to handle the diversity of not only your opponents, different opponents, but also different situations where you get to a point when you're playing in college and you might be playing an away match where the predominantly people are against you. You've got to be able to handle that as well. I've been fortunate to be able to travel around the world the last 25 or 30 years. I formed a company called Stan Smith Events, and we help corporations entertain their clients at major events, not only tennis events, the 4 majors, but at the Olympics, at the rugby, at the British Open golf. And so our goal is to go to take a company like American Express and set up a program for them for let's say the last 3 days of Wimbledon or AT&T, during the U.S. Open, to get tickets and organize a program. And I generally host those events. And we'll have other players sometimes, like a McEnroe or Martina or Chrissy, come and I'll interview them. We'll do photographs and get signed memorabilia and hopefully make the event come to life even more than it is. I mean, a Wimbledon ticket is pretty special, but to have a Wimbledon ticket and have lunch and photographs and get some memorabilia and compete in a who's going to win the match situation makes it even more special. So that company's been going for almost 30 years now, and so it's been also an opportunity for me to travel around. And then, as being a president of the International Tennis Hall of Fame for 10 years, I just stepped down last year, but I was very involved in the current players, because we're inducting the players 5 years after they finish their career into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. And so literally all the great players who've ever played the game going back into the 1800s are now in the Hall of Fame. So I'm very involved in the game today, and still traveling about half the time, going to these events or going to other things I'm doing for Adidas and that sort of thing.
Since you have been so involved in the game so deeply for so long, your opinion on who the greatest player in the game ever was?
You mean the second greatest?
Well, of course, second greatest. After Stan Smith, who would you pick number 2?
Well, on the men's side, my list goes with until let's say 20 years ago. Well, obviously, it would have been different. When you got three guys in the last 20 years that have dominated the game in Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and then the other three guys I put on that list is Laver, who won the Grand Slam twice. No one's won it since. Djokovic was one match away. Several players have been very, very close, but you got to put him in there. And he didn't even get a chance to play some of the majors for 6 years. He won 11. He would have won 20 for sure, because he won the Grand Slam before and after that period, and he probably would have won at least 2 a year for those 5 or 6 years. So he's up there. And then Sampras, who was number one in the world for 6-7 years, and Borg, who won the French 6 times. And I predicted that no one would ever win 6 French Opens, and I was right. Nadal's won 14. So Nadal is just it's not even comparable to anything what he did at the French, for instance. And of course Federer did it, and Djokovic has done it in these other tournaments, and at the Australian and the U.S. Open and Wimbledon. And so those are there's been a lot of great players. On the women's side, you look at Steffi Graf, who was 122, and the Margaret Courts won the most of all. She was back in the era with Rod Laver as far as winning, Grand Slams. She won the Grand Slam, and then all these other Grand Slam events. Martina Navratilova, I mentioned Chrissy, and then
Serena probably.
Serena and Venus is up there pretty high, but I encourage these women to really recognize Billie Jean King because of what she's done for the women's game since she started playing majors when she was in the 60s, 1960s. So, and of course the battle of the sexes, and then everything else has taken place with equal prize money at the U.S. Open first, and then all the majors, and then a lot of the events now are combined events, men and women.
Well, that's just such a pleasure to talk to you, Stan, and thank you so much for having us. I'm Scott Fowler. This is Sports Legends of the Carolinas. Thank you so much, Stan Smith.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to Sports Legends of the Carolinas, a production of the Charlotte Observer. This show is produced by Lou May Ali Sally, Jeff Seiner, and Cotta Stevens. The sports editor of the Charlotte Observer is Lydia Craver. The executive editor is Raina Cash. If you know a sports fan, we've got a great gift idea for you. We've compiled the first 2 seasons of the Sports Legends interviews into a coffee table book, which includes more than 100 rare photos. Among the 33 legends in the book are Steph Curry, Roy Williams, Mike Krzyzewski, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Steve Spurrier, Jake Delhomme, and Dawn Staley. The first printing sold out quickly, but the book is back in stock now, and you can order a copy at sportslegendsbook.com. For lots more sports content, please visit charlotteobserver.com and consider a digital subscription. You can connect with me, Scott Fowler, by email at sfowler@charlotteobserver.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review the Sports Legends of the Carolinas podcast. Thanks for spending some time with us, and we'll see you next time.